Now, normally during the opening theme, I would sit quietly with reverence, but today I am obligated to my sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than myself. Hello, you may not know
Welcome
this,
to
but I
Anime
write
Audio
novels,
Commentary,
and I've written quite a few.
Today I'll be commenting on
I'm
episode
going to tell
10
you
of the Familiar
about
Zero.
the eccentric
If you'd
detective
like to watch
Yamamoto,
along, then start watching
in which the intrepid,
now.
if drunken detective solves a wide variety of cases with the help of her assistant
really a
Satoshi.
good thing when Princess
Ranging
Henrietta
from finding
decides
missing
to
pets and
show up in the
surveilling
middle of the
cheating
night in
spouses
Louise's
to catching
room,
a high-end cat
and,
burglar and
she's not
preventing the murder
immediately
of a local
forthcoming
business
with
magnate.
why she's here,
No
except for
case is
saying
too big or
she
too
has
small
a
for
secret
Detective
request.
Yamamoto. Even when she's forced to work with, and occasionally against, the police, and even when she must contend with her fear of the supernatural, normally during the opening theme,
will prevent
I would
the
sit
eccentric
quietly
detective
with reverence
from doing what
but
needs
today
to be done
I am
to solve the
obligated
case.
to my sponsor. If this sounds
Today's
like something
sponsor
you'd
is
like
none
to
other
read,
than myself.
then by all means,
You may not know this,
consider
but I write
purchasing
light
books in the
novels,
eccentric
and I've written quite a
Detective
few.
Yamamoto series
Today,
by me.
I'm going to tell
Frederick
you
Fitzgerald
about the eccentric
through
detective
Yamamoto.
Thank
in
you
which
very
the
much for your
intrepid,
time,
if drunken,
and enjoy the
detective
episode.
solves a wide variety of cases with the help of her assistant Satoshi, ranging from finding missing pets and surveilling cheating spouses to catching a high-end cat burglar and preventing the murder of a local business magnate. No case is too big or too small for Detective Yamamoto. Even when she's forced to work with, and occasionally against, the police, and even when she must contend with her fear of the supernatural, nothing will prevent the eccentric detective from doing what needs to be done to solve the case. If this sounds like something you'd like to read, then by all means, consider purchasing books in the eccentric Detective Yamamoto series by me, Frederick Fitzgerald, through Amazon. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the episode. So, with an episode going as far as the title itself, The Princess's Request, it's gotta be a big deal. And, lest we forget, Louise has just recently come off the effects of that love potion, which, that's not great at the best of times. Now, the princess, she seems to be engaging in a little political marriage with Germania, and I don't know. There's a lot that could be said about this, because it might be something she's doing without the knowledge of other powers that be, or it's something she has to do but doesn't really want to do. Either way, things are sort of dangerous, because I seem to recall that there's a whole bunch of political instability brewing with a lot of anti-monarchist sentiment, and, as a monarch, that's a rough place to be in, And historically, what we know about France, things didn't go too well, And there are a whole lot of interesting political reasons for why that ended up being the case, but really the big factor in my readings is that essentially the monarchy isolated the nobility from the peasantry, and therefore, the nobility was unable to act as a sort of mediating body between the two groups. Because, when nobility lives among the peasants, they do kind of have to, listen to them to some degree. Things can't be allowed to get so bad that you start, inventing and breaking out the guillotines. Although that said, it seems like Princess Henrietta is marrying into Germania for political reasons, and she would rather marry into Albion, but Albion is the source of all this political instability. Prince Wales is essentially a prince in exile. He's effectively deposed and all that, and, Henrietta would like something delivered to him, but that's dangerous, because that's going into enemy territory and essentially engaging with an outlaw, I suppose would be the term. Prince Wales being deposed is now outside of the law. It's sort of like kill on sight type of business, which, that doesn't bode well for anyone who wants to interact with him. And speaking of things that don't well for interacting people, Guiche has decided to eavesdrop and then get involved, and I can't blame the guy to a degree. From a purely self-serving perspective, this is something good. You do the princess a favor and you're in her good graces, assuming, of course, the monarchy stays around. Oh dear. Very ominous indeed. Saito's doing laundry, and in the process of doing that, he snapped a little elastic band in a garment. Surely this will not come back to bite everyone in the fundament. Although I have to wonder, was that truly elastic? I was given to understand that elastic and stuff like that was a fairly modern invention. They wouldn't have it in pre-revolution France, but I don't know, I might be surprised. I seem to recall that Velcro, of all things, is a fairly old invention, or at least older than anyone would reasonably think. Now, I suppose it's neither here nor there, because Professor Colbert is talking about the fifth element here. It is interesting that everything we had heard was described in terms of 4 elements thus far, but there's a fifth one, the void. And, it's certainly the odd one out. I do think it's slightly humorous that there seems to be an utter lack of void magic in the world, but, maybe there's a reason for it. Now, Colbert is dropping a fair bit more lore regarding to Gandalfur and all that other stuff, and that, if Saito truly is this legendary familiar, then that would make Louise a void mage. But seeing as how she hasn't displayed any talent for any magic whatsoever, there's no actual proof. And now, Professor Colbert's talking about all, these cool things he has, dragon's blood, but, that doesn't look like any blood I've ever seen. And he says he extracted the blood shed by a dragon, and he's working on duplicating it. But I feel like if there's any sort of blood that you can duplicate with chemistry equipment, it's probably not blood. And, given what we've seen about the Staff of Destruction, I think it's fair to say that what the people of Tristane would assume is a dragon might well be something else, So this is a rare moment of vulnerability from Louise. She is always sort of vulnerable, but she's being sincere to Saito and not looking down her nose at him. But it's understandable. The princess has tasked her with something very important, and she naturally is worried about her lack of magical ability. Because, if things hit the fan, she is effectively useless. And yeah, she can rely on Saito, but it's not an absolute thing, So I guess Saito is sort of doubling down on this, that should things start rocketing fanward, he will protect her. And to a degree, that's the expectation, a familiar protects its master, but I suppose it's a little bit different when your familiar is humaniform in nature rather than, an animal, a dragon or a mole or something like that. So, yeah, I think it's over when Princess Henrietta is essentially, asking Louise to transport a ring, the ring is ostensibly proof that Louise is acting on behalf of the crown and all that, it being a ruby passed down from her mother, but yeah, I don't know. There's a lot there, and it ain't good. Just because I feel like, I don't know if you would call it a crown jewel per se, because it's not embedded in a crown, although it is owned by the crown. I feel like the anti-monarchist revolutionaries would be real dead set on melting that thing down and despoiling it, which, that's not good, especially since it's being given to Louise for the purposes of identification. Oh dear. So things are already hitting the fan, I guess. Gishu's familiar has a real thing for jewelry. And I suppose as an earth spirit, that would make sense, gems being of the earth. But at the same time, Louise wouldn't let Saito act like this. I feel like Gish should perhaps rein in his little beast a wee bit more than he's currently doing. Now, the princess did mention arranging a bodyguard, and I feel like this might well be it, someone capable of presumably using magic and, riding on a magnificent, well, beast of war, I suppose, a griffin. Having watched, The Man in the Iron Mask in the intervening years between now and the first time I watched this, I guess I can't help but wonder if he's intended to be a musketeer. Ward's here. Now, this guy introduces an interesting dynamic because he is Louise's fiancé, and no one had mentioned any of this before. Granted, no one asked, but boy howdy, especially in light of all that business with the love potion, there are a few awkward questions that don't have good answers. And, oh dear. Very unfortunate for Kirsch that there's a good-looking man who's after Louise. Very unfortunate indeed. So, I think I see where things are going. Louise is engaged to the guy, Guiche is singing his praises, and Ward's seems to be, by all metrics, like a good guy. He's a captain of a griffin unit, as they call it, presumably a magical cavalry. He's got a noble woman for a fiancé, and he's been assigned this important task by the princess personally. So there's really not a bad thing you can say about the guy on paper, but naturally this is cause for jealousy, even if Saito can't necessarily account for that jealousy. Because I think, at this point in time, he would probably be the first to admit that he probably doesn't particularly like Louise. He might love her in a nascent sort of way, but he doesn't like her. And, those two aren't necessarily the same thing. You can love someone but not like them. You can like someone but not love them. And Louise certainly does her best to be unlikable a lot of the time, to her own detriment. But nevertheless, I reckon things are going to get frosty really quickly, especially if Louise keeps glancing at Saito and then sort of turning up her nose at him. Because, I get it. He's a familiar, he is beneath her, but that doesn't mean you gotta treat him poorly all the time, Wow, just seeing that side shot, just the griffin compared to the horses, that really is a magnificent beast, and it's probably both quite dangerous and very well trained, because I reckon a giant beast like that would be carnivorous, and it would probably be the sort of thing to eat horses, and, it's not doing any of that, so it must be better trained than Saito, I suppose. So, Louise has begun to chastise Saito, she's starting by explaining things. It's like, look, we're engaged, but it was decided by my parents and all that. At least Saito is sort of conciliatory, saying that, yeah, he's a nice enough guy for an aristocrat. So, Louise, it seems like she can't help but rub things in a little bit, bringing up stuff about Ward's that, yeah, he's achieved all he has through hard work, so, oh dear. It seems as though both people are endeavoring to make everything worse, between Louise just seeming to try and rub things in, and Saito saying, well, with him around you don't need me. And that may well be true, strictly speaking, but as a familiar, you can't exactly stray far just by convention. Now, Derflinger, he's right on the money, I think, saying, hey, man, this is some real monkey business going on. Oh, wow. Ward's is just lying right to her face, saying, hey, that's just like Louise to summon a human for a familiar. And he means it as praise. And, it may well be a praiseworthy thing, but, come on. Everyone knows Louise has no real talent, magically speaking. Now, Wards can't also help but pick at Saito a little bit. Not, in such a way as to incense him, but saying like, hey, you fought that thief, you dueled Guiche, and you've scarcely wielded a sword up to that point, so, hey, that's gotta be pretty remarkable. And, yeah, Saito's not taking it well. I wouldn't put it past him to, throw down the gauntlet. Not that he's necessarily entitled to such a thing, but I feel like it would probably be treated in good humor, even if it isn't really a good thing. Although I guess, Wards is bringing it up. He wants to spar, so it's not a duel, it's not... But that said, it is, It is distinctly goading, saying like, hey, look, we can spar, but we don't have to do it, and I'll go easy on you. So it's like... I don't know. That's not good. And more to the point, when Louise says we can't sleep in the same room, and he says, well, yeah, we can, we're engaged, so, yeah, I can definitely see why Saito would be rubbed the wrong way about all this stuff. And speaking of being rubbed the wrong way here, that was, very clearly, Miss Longville, I believe her name was, her assumed name. So, she's out and about, she was freed by Cromwell, she's, listening in, she no doubt intends to cause trouble, probably at, the most inopportune time. So, poor Saito, it seems he doesn't even have the company of Guiche to assuage himself with, because, he saw a woman, he has to chat her up. I guess rather than dwelling on it, he's just sort of, asking questions, If anyone would know stuff about ancient lore, it would be Derflinger. So, the question of what is Gandalf like, he's probably asking the right thing, but, the sword gives kind of an idiosyncratic answer. It's like, Gandalf is my partner. Simple as. Oh, that's interesting. Wards is a Viscount. Now, I admit I don't know exactly where that stacks up in the various noble titles and all that, but, if you have a title, that's something. But seeing this flashback, that's evocative, just seeing the difference in age here, especially given that he's seemingly drinking wine with Louise, that's, for want of a better term, distinctly French. I've heard they do drink wine at a fairly early age. Quite a bit, but, alright. Darn, that is unfortunate. Wards is just, drinking and saying, hey, let's get married after this mission, and Louise is sort of surprised by it, especially because she had been talking about her lack of magical talent up to that point, but, I don't know. Things are moving at a real fast clip here, and not towards a good conclusion. Ooh, so Derflinger's actually dropped some interesting lore here that the Gandalfer runes, they only work on weapons designed to be weapons, hence why that fancy sword broke, it being a display piece. Now, it is interesting that Derflinger also says, hey, look, if you want to fight Wards, if you are to beat him, that's on you here. Just the power to wield a weapon isn't the end-all be-all, Now, Wards is also sort of talking, he's talking a big game here about increasing his station, nobly speaking, which, I get it, you say that stuff privately, but, some of that stuff might border on, treason and stuff. Because he was talking about being, renowned continent-wide rather than just in his country. Oh, dear. So Louise has ruined the mood, I get why the thought might spring to mind, but boy, that's a bitter pill to swallow for someone's fiancé, Yeah, so He's feigning magnanimity, I think, but, man. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's playing a little game here, just trying to, like, rile Louise up a little bit. Just, you know... I reckon he's a better manipulator than Saito is. You know, he's playing chess while everyone else plays checkers. Oh dear. So it seems like no one's really having a good night, you know. Wards and Louise are sort of on the rocks. Saito's probably not doing too well. Guiche got slapped. I feel like the poor guy probably didn't deserve that, but, oh dear. You know, I do believe that was Miss Longville hanging out with Wards, both in disguise. You know, that likely doesn't bode well for this mission to Albion. So Wards is back to, sort of goading Saito into reckless action. And it is telling that Louise is saying, like, hey guys, knock it off, and everyone just sort of ignores her. Which, when you get down to it, like, I think that does say something about nobility. It's like, yeah, having a title is all well and good, being the daughter of a nobleman is all well and good, but the meritocracy of aristocracy is upheld by the meritocracy of being able to commit violence. So, even if Saito is able to sort of match Wards, you know, this is the true test of who's better, being able to, just wallop each other. And unfortunately, it seems like, Wards' training is winning out over Saito's, magical talent, I guess, for want of a better term. And I guess the fact that it can also cast magic is something that works to his benefit. You know, Saito being forced only to use a sword. So this is something of a bitter pill, you know, that, like, look, if you can't use magic, you can't win against a mage. If you can't win against a mage, you can't protect Louise. And I feel like that was a very strategic phrase, you know, for both Saito and Louise. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.